come now to the first backbench speaker, Mr. Tom Greatrex.
Very much, Mr. Speaker, and can I begin by congratulating my right honourable friends on the front bench for this motion today and for rightly acknowledging the campaign out with this place to bring the issue of a cumulative impact assessment to our attention today. And I wanted to begin perhaps by making a very non-partisan point, which is that all of us in this House, of whatever side of this House, I believe, do our best to stand up for our constituents. And many of our constituents that come to see us are those who are disadvantaged the most. And that's why it's right to make the point this afternoon that there are many who have approached members on all sides of this House who have been concerned about the impact of changes in government policy in recent times. Not necessarily always the intended consequences, although some would suggest that perhaps that's sometimes the case, but sometimes also the unintended consequences. And that's why it's so vitally important that there should be a cumulative impact assessment, because there are very many people who I come across who come to see me in my surgeries and who I interact with in my constituency who are disabled, who have been injured at work or through no fault of their own find themselves in a position where they're unable to work, who want to live as independently as they possibly can, who require a level of support. Now, for some of those, some of the changes in government policy may have an impact, which may be difficult but won't necessarily make a difference, an overall difference, but a cumulative impact can often make a very significant difference in the way in which people are able to live their lives. And that's why it's important that we have a full and complete assessment. And it's something which I would really hope that the government, despite the contribution from the Minister of Work just now, would actually embrace, not just as it's a coalition initiative, but because it is fundamentally important when they're undertaking such a significant change to the way in which support for disabled people works in the UK. But what I wanted to do in the time I have is just touch on one particular aspect of that, which is the work capability assessment, because I have spoken about this a number of times over the past 2.5 years, and I have to say that the Minister of Work's predecessor, the current Lord Chancellor, was someone who you could engage with. You wouldn't always necessarily agree with, but he would at least listen. You could go and see him, as I have done on a number of occasions. But that attitude is contrasted very sharply with what we see now and what we've seen more recently. And I make this point because the attitude, I'm afraid, is something which underlies the importance of having this type of cumulative assessment. Because I have, on a number of occasions, asked a number of parliamentary questions in relation to the work capability assessment. And I found, and the Minister for Work is now listening, so I'll address directly to him through the chair, that he will recall that I've asked written questions where previously his department have answered, and more latterly they've decided they weren't going to answer. And they decided they weren't going to answer because actually we've decided that because of a change in the resources available to the department, we're no longer going to answer this question because it was requested in a slightly different format. Now, those questions were asked in exactly the same way, but the Minister refused to answer. The Minister will be aware, because there have been at least 2 debates on this occasion, that my right honourable friend, the member for Oldham, had sought to meet him alongside myself and other campaigners, and he's refused to do so. He will also be aware, I'm sure, that the National Audit Office... I will indeed.
What I've said is that, and I've written to the right honourable member of this, is if Spartacus, a group he wants to bring, want to come up with some positive suggestions to how we can improve the WCA, I will see them.
If the Minister won't see him, how can he know the level of the constructive engagement that that group is offering? The judgment he made at the start of that exchange, and I'll leave this to my right honourable friend because I'm sure he will want to get in to speak on this, was precisely that he would refuse to see them because he didn't want to engage with them. And this is the point that I'm trying to make here in relation to a consistent number of examples. And this is something which I think the Minister should, I hope, reflect on, if not even today, over the course of the summer. Because the National Audit Office also made the point last summer around the failure of the DWP to apply the penalties or service credits within the WCA in relation to the underperformance by ATOS Healthcare and failing to seek adequate financial redress. It was almost as though they just didn't want to apply them because that would indicate that there was a problem in the system. And then more recently, and I think most... I will indeed.
I'm very grateful. He's making an extremely important speech. I'm sure his experience will be the same as mine. The constituents that come to see me time and time again, it's ATOS. That's the only word I seem to hear some days because of the nightmare that company is and the problems it expresses to my constituents.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. He makes an important point, and it's partly about ATOS Healthcare, and I believe they have been appalling in the way they've delivered the contract, but it's also about the deficiencies in the contract, and that's something which this government, and particularly, I have to say, it doesn't give me any great pleasure to say this, but particularly since the current Minister for Work has been in place, are seemingly refusing to deal with. And I would make this in reference to the Dr. Greg Wood, the ATOS employed doctor who left the employment of ATOS just at the start of May this year, and in the middle of May he made a series of very serious and specific allegations of the way in which his experience as a doctor working within an ATOS centre, the way in which the work capability assessment was carried out. Now he, for the record, isn't somebody who suggests that we should get rid of the assessment. He isn't somebody who suggests there shouldn't be an assessment. He isn't somebody who suggests even that they get the cases wrong at either end of the scale, but that people in the middle are being caught because of a flawed way in which the system is designed and the way in which it's implemented. Now he made a number of specific allegations about claimants not being assessed in an even-handed way, healthcare professionals not free to make independent recommendations, evidence being missing or never sought in the first place, medical knowledge being twisted, points wrongly withheld through the use of an erroneously high standard of proof. If ATOS assessors show deviation from the official line, the HCP is instructed to change the report. In about a quarter of assessments, documentary evidence is missing, but the assessments go on regardless. Training of new healthcare professionals creates an environment where they expect they will see, in the course of their works, score too few points to qualify for ESA, and that's the de facto starting hypothesis. HCPs often begrudgingly score claimants, an attitude drilled into healthcare professionals which lean towards finding reasons not to award points. Now they are very serious allegations. And they're allegations I would have expected the government to take seriously. Because if the warm words that we hear about improving this process, about constantly being vigilant, about making it better for people, which the Minister and the Secretary of State who's now left his place frequently make, then you would have thought they would actually investigate those allegations. Now, I wrote to the Prime Minister on that day asking him to do that. He passed the correspondence on to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, who wrote back to me on the 22nd of June. And what I got back was a one-page, I have it here, a one-page letter, which made absolutely no reference to any of those specific allegations at all. Didn't say there was a problem, just a standard response, absolutely wanting to brush this under the carpet. And it's that type of attitude which belies the problems in the situation. Now, I have to say, just in passing, that the Secretary of State's private office, by mistake, also emailed me on the same day a copy of a letter to another Member of Parliament from the government benches raising an individual's case where there was a much more systematic and detailed response. Now, perhaps that's maybe because the initial letter came from me or from someone on this side, but I really hope not, because those were really serious allegations and they decided to completely ignore them. Madam Deputy Speaker, this, I have to say, isn't just about the frustrations of seeking information from the government, though I do accept I do get frustrated about that. This isn't just about the waste and inefficiency in a programme which is costing £110 million a year for the ATOS contract and now up to £70 million this year in the appeals process to correct those mistakes. This isn't just about an attitude, although I do say again to the Minister that I have found him to be both dismissive, evasive and sometimes partisan in any of our engagement on this issue. This is about the experience of real people in every single part of this country. This is about the experience and realities of people often having to adjust their life circumstances due to circumstances completely beyond their control through illness or through accident or incident. This is about people who will have been seeing a system which isn't properly working, where the government rolled out the migration from incapacity benefit without taking into account the lessons from the pilot projects that were identified, and did that and have had the consequences that have there been since then. But most of all, this is about decency, about compassion, and about helping people and not hounding people. This is wrong. It needs to change.